These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code TOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code TOM.
Reading today from a book by David Sanger, the Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times national security reporter. The title of the book is The Perfect Weapon, War, Sabotage, and Fear in the Cyber Age. We're reading from the preface. A year into Donald J. Trump's presidency, his defense secretary, Jim Mattis, sent the new commander-in-chief a startling recommendation. With nations around the world threatening to use cyber weapons to bring down America's power grids, cell phone networks, and water supplies, Trump should declare that he's ready to take extraordinary steps to protect the country. If any nation hit America's critical infrastructure with a devastating strike, even a non-nuclear one, it should be forewarned that the United States might reach for a nuclear weapon in response. Like most things in Washington, the recommendation leaked immediately. Excuse me. Many declared it a crazy idea and wild overkill. While nations had turned their cyber weapons against each other dozens of times in recent years, no attack had yet proven to cost a human life, at least directly. Not the American attacks on Iran's and North Korea's weapon programs, not the North Korean attacks on American banks, a famed Hollywood studio, and the British healthcare system, not the Russian attacks in Ukraine, Europe, and then at the core of American democracy. That streak of luck was certain to end soon. But why should Donald Trump or any of his successors take the huge risk of escalating a cyber war by going nuclear? The Pentagon's recommendation, it turned out, was the prelude to other proposals delivered to a president who values toughness and America first to use the nation's powerful cyber weapons far more aggressively. But it was also a reminder of how quickly the fear of devastating cyber attacks has moved from the stuff of science fiction and die-hard movies to the center of American defense strategy. Just over a decade before, in 2007, cyber attacks were missing entirely from the global threat assessment that intelligence agencies prepare each year for Congress. Terrorism topped that list, along with other post-9/11 concerns. Now that hierarchy has been reversed. For several years, a variety of cyber threats, ranging from a paralyzing strike on the nation's cities to a sophisticated effort to undercut public confidence in its institutions, has appeared as the nation's #1 threat on the list. Not since the Soviets tested the bomb in 1949 had the perception of threats facing the nation been revised so quickly. Yet Mattis, who had risen to 4-star status in a career focused in the Middle East, feared that the 2 decades spent chasing Al-Qaeda and ISIS around the globe had distracted America from its most potent challenges. Great power competition, not terrorism, is now the primary focus of U.S. national security, he said in early 2018. America's, quote, competitive edge has eroded in every domain of warfare, including the newest one, cyberspace. The nuclear strategy he handed Trump gave voice to an inchoate fear among many in the Pentagon that cyber attacks posed a threat unlike any other, one that we had completely failed to deter. The irony is that the United States remains the world's stealthiest, most skillful cyber power, as the Iranians discovered when their centrifuges spun out of control, and the North Koreans suspected as their missiles fell out of the sky. But the gap is closing. Cyber weapons are so cheap to develop and so easy to hide that they've proven irresistible. And American officials are discovering that in a world in which almost everything is connected, phones, cars, electrical grids, and satellites, everything can be disrupted, if not destroyed. For several years, the thinking inside the Pentagon was that only nations with nuclear weapons could threaten America's existence. Now that assumption is in doubt. In almost every classified Pentagon scenario for how a future confrontation with Russia and China, or even Iran and North Korea might play out, the adversary's first strike against the United States would include a cyber barrage aimed at civilians. It would fry power grids, stop trains, silence cell phones, and overwhelm the internet. In the worst-case scenarios, food and water would begin to run out. Hospitals would turn people away. Separated from their electronics and thus their connections, Americans would panic and turn against one another. The Pentagon is now planning for this scenario because it knows many of its own war plans open with similarly paralyzing cyber attacks against our adversaries, reflecting new strategies to try to win wars before a shot is fired. Glimpses of what this would look like have leaked out in recent years, thanks partly to Edward J. Snowden, partly because of a mysterious group called the Shadow Brokers, suspected of close links to Russian intelligence, to obtain terabytes of data containing many of the tools that the National Security Agency used to breach foreign computer networks. It didn't take long for some of those stolen cyber weapons to be shot back at America and its allies in attacks whose bizarre-sounding names, like WannaCry, suddenly appeared in the headlines every week. Yet the secrecy surrounding these programs obscures most public debate about the wisdom of using them or the risks inherent in losing control of them. The government's silence about America's new arsenal and its implications poses a sharp contrast to the first decades of the nuclear era. The horrific scenes of destruction at Hiroshima and Nagasaki not only seared the national psyche, but made America's destructive capabilities, and soon Russia's and China's, obvious and undeniable. Yet even while the government kept the details classified, how to build atomic weapons, where they are stored, and who has the authority to order their launch, America engaged in a decades-long political debate about when to threaten to use the bomb and whether to ban it. The book, The Perfect Weapon by David E. Sanger.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, things got very, very wild yesterday as we were in our third hour, in the last hour of the program, and as we, after we get off the air. Just to very quickly bring you up to date, Congress ultimately did certify Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as president and vice president of the United States, or president, vice president-elect. And so we now have, 13 days until January 20th? And an enormous amount of damage can be done in 13 days. And there are two levels on which I am very concerned about this. Number one is the level of the Trump supporters, the people who have basically sworn loyalty to a cult of personality, who are, carrying Trump flags rather than American flags, just this whole, it's Jim Jonesville, right? And I saw this thing on Twitter yesterday. We are not done. Today we learned how weak the response was. The 20th is coming. By the way, 420 is one of the numbers that the American neo-Nazis frequently use as code for Adolf Hitler's birthday, April 20th. Now they're referring to the 20th. Here we go again. The 20th is coming. We have been training for this for over a decade. This is not going away, all caps not, and now it will escalate. And here it comes, right? So number one, You've got the followers of Donald Trump who are looking at yesterday as, hey, we just discovered how easy this is, many of these people. And how, little consequence apparently there is. I mean, you had people on Fox News and on other right-wing media basically saying, well, it's boys will be boys. Seriously. You had this, on Fox News, One American News Network, Newsmax. Lynn Wood, Trump's lawyer, was tweeting that Mike Pence was a traitor, a communist sympathizer, and a child molester. Tucker Carlson said, we've got this sad, chaotic day for a reason. And he looks into the camera, speaking to his right-wing audience, and he says, it's not your fault, it's their fault. Who's the they? Well, his colleague on Fox News, Pete Hegseth, said this, but it wasn't because Donald Trump gave a speech and then told people to do something in the Capitol. Ultimately, to a man and to a woman, I talked to a lot of them yesterday. They said this is a culmination of a feeling I have where my country has been taken over by the left. My voice is being censored and silenced. I'm being canceled. My institutions are being fundamentally changed by the left. Socialists want to take over and transform our country. See, this is the ideology that Fred Koch was promoting back in the 50s when he was funding the John Birch Society and these impeach Earl Warren posters all over America, because Earl Warren, God forbid, in 1954 had been at the head of the Supreme Court when they passed the Brown versus Board ordering integration of our schools. But then it got even crazier than that, as the whole right-wing billionaire network just said any kind of government regulation at all, any kind of social safety net at all, any kind of protection for the average working person, that's socialism. We can't have that, right? So this is what he's blaming this on. He goes on to say, this is Pete Hegseth on Fox News last night. They feel like using COVID as a justification, mail-in ballots, ballot harvesting, going past the constitutional prerogatives of state legislatures, that option has been taken from them too. And so what do folks expect to happen? Well, no, we don't expect you to take the Capitol building. I mean, you prepare for the next election, right? He goes on to say, the images didn't shock me because if you understand how people feel about the moment we're in right now, we feel like we're at a crossroads. People weren't going into the Capitol to target individuals, to kill somebody. They were going in there symbolically, says Pete Hegseth on Fox News last night. If you look at what the left has done in targeting entire communities, private businesses, burning them to the ground, targeting police officers, private businesses. This is just random. No, he didn't say this. This is random acts of violence which are far more violent and far more destructive than what occurred yesterday. In other words, the lefties are worse than us. He goes on to say, ultimately, you have to be responsible to the needs of the people. People feel like they're not being listened to, like their vote is being ignored. No, their votes were all counted. They just came up about 7 million short. But this is what the right-wingers are saying. So my number one concern is the followers of Donald Trump. And actually, it's kind of my number two concern, but it's the first one I'm laying out for you. That this movement has not stopped. It hasn't even gone underground. It's very, very active. And on January 20th, they're planning a whole brand new thing from what I'm seeing. Now, I'm not inside any of these groups, but hey, this is what I'm seeing. Then the other area that I'm concerned about, and this is the piece I published on medium.com this morning, is on March 19th, 1945. Now, this was 3 weeks before Adolf Hitler committed suicide. The Russians were invading from the northeast. The Americans were invading from the southwest and the west. And Hitler ordered the tank divisions and the German Air Force to just bomb the crap out of Germany. Basically, bomb my own country back to the Stone Age. This was referred to as, this order that he gave, And he gave it to Albert Speer, who had become very, very close to him. He was the architect, literally an architect, designed buildings guy. He gave this order, and Albert Speer kind of prevented it from going into effect. But this is how dictators very often go out, is they take everybody down with them. My friend Armin Lehman, he's been on this program. He passed away a few years ago. But he was the 16-year-old kid who took the news to Hitler that the war was lost in the Fuhrer bunker, and he was there when Hitler committed suicide. And he pointed out that Hitler was trying to destroy Germany. He had ordered the destruction of Berlin. Again, the soldiers didn't carry it out. At that point, Armin was one of the senior soldiers at 16. They were recruiting 12-year-old boys. But Hitler was like, we've got to destroy if I can't run this country, nobody can run this country. We're going to destroy it. And he's not the only one. Robert Mugabe, in his last days, ordered 20,000 people murdered in a state that didn't vote for him in the presidential election. And they were murdered. Jim Jones wasn't a political leader, although he did have aspirations. But I think he's the prototype of a psychopathic narcissist, which is, very common. There's a reason why these guys almost never voluntarily leave office. They either die in office, like Stalin did, or they are taken out, typically in a war, like Hitler and Mussolini were. But, very rarely do they say, oh, I guess the people don't want me anymore. I'll see you guys later. And Trump still has the nuclear codes. He's still the commander-in-chief of the military. So I am calling, and I'm very gratified to see that Chuck Schumer this morning and my Senator Jeff Merkley just called for Trump to be removed from power either by impeachment in the House and the Senate, and it can be done in a day, I believe, or through Mike Pence calling the cabinet together and invoking the 25th Amendment and perhaps even institutionalizing Donald Trump against his will. So those are my thoughts on the last 24 hours. What are yours? We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with your thoughts and more. We basically have a day to kind of process this, all 3 hours here today. We'll be right back. And welcome back. What a day, huh? What a crazy, crazy day. Dennis in Aptos, California. Watch this on Free Speech TV. Hey, Dennis, what's up?
Well, it started out great because Ossoff and Warnock obviously were the winners. But after that, it continually just went downhill. I was actually at an acupuncturist appointment when all this stuff started happening. What I saw, though, the highlights, if you will, one scene in particular really irked me, and it was of someone in the foreground who was obviously a Trump supporter, motioning for people to come into the Capitol building, and you had about 10 or 11 cops between him and the mob, and these cops just kind of stood there with their finger up their you-know-whats and didn't do anything. Just kind of let
did you see the video that Steve Schmidt has been retweeting for since yesterday afternoon? It's there was a police barricade, and the Capitol Police were there, and a couple of Capitol cops pull the barricade back and create a big gap and welcome these guys into the Capitol building.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you something, Tom. I'm a 66-year-old white male. And not that I don't look all that much different, because I have a Southern European background, not that I don't look that much different from somebody who's brown. But I've never trusted cops. And, I think I've told you about this Pacific Grove cop, had the 3%er sticker. He's been reinstated. And then later on, he goes on social media and puts out a message, F Black Lives Matter. I guess he's still there. They're trying to say he has First Amendment rights to say that. But if he's a 3%er, he's a member of a terrorist group. And, again, I heard this morning somebody using the term militia to describe these oath keepers and Proud Boys. They are not militias. They're terrorists.
No, they're
jihadis. They're gangsters. And militia, the California Highway Patrol, that's a militia. These guys aren't militias.
Well, the only militias that we have in the United States are the National Guard. They are the state militias.
I think,
and of course the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marine Corps. I mean, and arguably the Coast Guard. Yeah.
I mean, the California Highway, obviously they're more cops than anything else.
Yeah, that's a police force. That's not a militia, but a militia. But calling these guys militias, that's their word for themselves, right? It simply elevates them, and it's not what they are. They're armed gangs.
They're using the term militia in the Second Amendment as a cover for what they do, and they're Nazis, they're fascists. They've got Trump as a fascist. I'm glad, I'm hearing more and more people. Amy Goodman had somebody on this morning, and she just said he's an out-and-out fascist, Trump, and he doesn't believe in democracy, and we need more people to say that. And Hawley, oh my God, I mean, he went to Stanford. I don't know what state he's from. I guess he might. Yeah, he went to Stanford.
He represents Missouri. He took Claire McCaskill's seat.
Exactly, and Yale Law School, but Stanford for 4 years in the Bay Area. I know Stanford very well. I've gone to many Stanford football games in my lifetime. I went to Santa Clara, by the way, just down the road about 10 miles. But you think of places like Santa Clara with the Jesuit education, and they teach ethics.
I think what it proves, Dennis, is that there's a difference between being smart and being wise. Anyhow, Dennis, I got to run. Thanks for the call. Spot on. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So what if Donald Trump loses the election and decides that he's going to punish America for not being sufficiently loyal to him, for not loving him, for not reelecting him? And so he has, Jerome Powell, his hand-picked successor to the, as the new chair of the Fed, who has created $7 trillion out of thin air and used much of it to buy stocks and bonds to prop up the bond market. That's 1/3 of the entire nation's entire annual gross domestic product. What if he orders Powell to stop supporting the stock and bond markets between, November 3rd and January 20th? The bottom would fall out of the market. The bottom would fall out of the housing market as well, particularly if inflation started going up, which Powell has already indicated he's going to let happen. And the country would be thrown into something worse than the Republican Great Depression of the 1930s. Is it possible? Well, we've got a video talking about that for the supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, get your thoughts on all this. Ken in Madison, Wisconsin. I also have a large stack of news and related issues and rants going back to what happened when Lincoln became president and they started expelling senators. We'll get to that in the second and third hour of the program. But first, I just wanted to put this big issue on the table here. Ken, what's on your mind in Madison, Wisconsin?
Hey, Tom. I wanted to question you if you're aware of any ethics violations that the Congress people were doing with trying to overturn the lawful election. I would think that trying to support a coup would be an ethics violation, and it should be.
I am with Cori Bush. Yeah, I'm with Cori Bush on this, Ken. And, Cori Bush, a newly elected member of Congress, a progressive, and one of the things, actually I've got a story on it, that she laid out was these guys should be expelled. They should not be allowed to sit in Congress any longer. This is a little over 120 members of the House, and I believe we're down to now 6 members of the Senate. And, in my opinion, they just should not be there. And, yeah, here we go. Marie Newman of Illinois, Jamal Bowman of New York, Mondaire Jones of New York, Cori Bush of Missouri, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley. It's kind of the new squad. And, Cori Bush said, expel the congressional Republicans who incited the attack. And then Mondaire Jones announced that he'd be co-sponsoring that measure. And then Marie Newman is also saying that she will be co-sponsoring Bush's resolution. Frankly, I doubt it's going to happen because, it would be seen as overreach, and that's just typically not how Congress does things. But it has happened in the past. I mean, there were members who were expelled during the Lincoln administration. So, and as I said, I'm going to get into that in more detail in the next hours. But I'm with you. I think these members, these 120 plus members of the House and these 6 members of the Senate, need to be, at the very least, reprimanded, hand slapped, censured, put in the corner, whatever it may be, or even better, expelled. They have violated their oath of office and to the Constitution, and they have certainly violated any position or misused any position of trust and faith that the American people have given them. Ken, thank you. Charles in Hollywood. Hey, Charles, what's up? Hollywood, Florida.
Hello?
Yeah, hey, Charles,
Hello?
what's on your mind?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. Happy New Year to you first time. I woke up at like...
Charles.
I'm sorry?
I said thank you. Back at you, Charles.
Oh, thank you. I woke up at 3 o'clock this morning. I don't know, TV woke me up. And I saw all of these people. And I saw more footage of the people on the steps of the Capitol yesterday than I did previously. And I was like, the first thing came to my mind was, none of these Republicans in the House ran out to stop these people while they was in the hallway. No type of leadership from them. And second of all, I was thinking, they should help these people. And it hit me too that they don't want to pay a fair minimum wage. They don't want health care for everyone. So they rather keep their people dumb, uneducated, and in the hole. And that's why, you have so many people out there with so many grievances when it's their own party and their own president is killing them. Now, I am going to pay attention, and I want to know how many Democrats are going to be trying to push the Republicans for the 25th Amendment. Or
Chuck Schumer just came out and said it. One of my senators here, Jeff Merkley, just tweeted 25th Amendment or immediate impeachment. This is becoming a growing chorus, Charles.
Right, and then second, last but not least, we got to force progressives. We have to force our party to sign a bill that's going to give us Medicare for all and to raise the minimum wage no matter what, because this is our time.
All that stuff is going to happen, but let's wait until this crisis is over. What I find crazy, Charles, is that things like Medicare for all are the things that these people are calling socialism and saying that they're willing to burn down the country, essentially, or at least trash the Capitol building to prevent from happening. I mean, that's how weird it is. Really? You don't want free Medicare?
Well, they've been lied to so long that they think that, like the guy said yesterday, if I have something, they're going to think that I, as a black person, took it from them. And it's up to our leadership to also reach out to these people now, even in the rural areas, and push progressive.
I agree. Charles, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. It is the day after the day after. Wow, it's amazing. We'll be right back. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
By the way, Muriel Bowser, the mayor of Washington, D.C., is calling for identification of these folks. I think she wants to arrest them before they leave town.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the LA Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that, though because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone and of his own accord would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur.
Coming up on the Science Revolution is Dr. Edwin C. May for an in-depth interview on how the federal government used ESP to spy on foreign governments. In brief, the U.S. military and intelligence communities funded a 20-year program to collect intelligence during the Cold War by using so-called psychics. Did it work? Was it successful? What happened and what can we learn from it? Dr. Edwin C. May also talks about the broader implications of ESP and psychics. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are found. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. There's two ways that this can be dealt with right away. Mike Pence invokes the 25th Amendment, gets a majority of the cabinet members to sign on. Donald Trump is temporarily removed from power. It goes to the House of Representatives, number one. Or number two, the House Judiciary Committee votes out it could be a 3 or 4 sentence article of impeachment for, say, incitement to riot and sedition. That gets passed by the entire House of Representatives. It goes to the Senate. The Senate holds a debate on it and votes on it. And if Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, soon to be Chuck Schumer, actually, but I'm not sure what date, because it was a special election in Georgia, I'm not sure what the date is when Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff are going to be actually sworn into the Senate. And that will be the day that Mitch McConnell is basically no longer in charge. But those are two ways to deal with this, 25th Amendment and impeachment. There are people who are saying, well, the worst is over now. Don't worry, Trump is just going to sit back and you know, he's been chastised. He's sort of like Susan Collins said when she voted not to impeach him before. She said, he's learned his lesson. Well, he's learned his lesson. When Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, resigned, he said that he has been asking people to stay on Trump's staff because he's afraid Trump will appoint even worse people. So if you don't think that Donald Trump in the next 2 weeks, it's the week after next, yesterday, that Donald Trump loses power at noon Eastern time. And if you don't think the time, the roughly 2 weeks between now and then, represents a time of danger, that Donald Trump isn't still planning things, then consider this. He put a guy named Chad Wolf in charge of the Department of Homeland Security, the top cop in America. DHS oversees everything. They oversee the FBI. They oversee the Secret Service. They oversee the TSA. The top cop is Chad Wolf. Chad is an acting Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. His nomination is sitting in the Senate, waiting for Mitch McConnell to ratify it. I'm guessing that they're not going to. They're just letting it run out. But yesterday, Chad Wolf was one of the guys who was just all gung-ho and excited. He's, about gassing people in Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. He's a big fan of putting kids in cages and treating immigrants and asylum seekers with maximum brutality. This guy is no, small d Democrat, small d Republican. And yesterday, Chad Wolf tweeted that the insurrectionists have to be held to account. And right after that, Donald Trump withdrew his nomination to be Secretary of DHS. Amazing. Amazing. Larry in Tyler, Texas, it says here you disagree with me about what?
No, I don't disagree with the violent protesting. I'm for protesting. I supported them up until they broke into the Capitol building, and every one of them should be arrested and prosecuted for the crimes they committed. My question is, what's the difference what happened yesterday to what happened in Seattle and Portland all summer long?
Larry, do you know of any politicians in America who are coming out and saying that when people protesting the murder of George Floyd and other murders, when a few of those people go off and start smashing windows and setting buildings on fire, they should not be arrested and prosecuted? Do you know anybody who's saying they shouldn't be arrested and prosecuted?
Yeah, you said that they were protesting their violence, and they were allowed to do that. Cuomo said...
Larry, bottom line is, if people are using violence, they need to be held to account. We are not in the middle of a revolution or a civil war. This is a political disagreement, and people there's no place for using violence in this
And I agree with you, but you made excuses all summer long for Seattle and Portland and all the other cities that were under attack. You called...
no, I did not.
The police,
the peaceful protesters in Seattle and Portland have my support. Absolutely.
Right.
The people who smashed windows? No, not at all. No, sir.
You said they were protesting their anger and that you did not stop them. AOC said that what they did was okay. Cuomo said there's...
Larry, I'm just not going to let you misrepresent reality. I'm going to move along here. James in Chicago. Hey, James.
Hey, Happy New Year, Tom. Can you hear me?
Back at you. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I want to talk about the 25th Amendment, but, regarding yesterday, I think about 4 people were killed, and that's unfortunate. But also, there was a couple of shots that were fired into the Capitol. Now,
that's right.
Tom, if those were Black Lives Matter people with those 2 shots being fired to the Capitol, you'd have dead bodies all on the Capitol steps. Come on now. That's just the way it is in this country. But regarding the 25th Amendment deal, even if they do that with Trump, I don't think Trump is going to be prosecuted. I'll tell you why. And I don't think that those Congress people are going to, if there's going to be any expulsion or anything. And that is because of this. These people are just the vocal part of a latent system. I mean, for 4 years, McConnell, Lindsey, all of them, they aided and abetted Trump, and they're just as much guilty. Now, Tom, if you and I go into
James, I don't see any way that Nancy Pelosi aided or abetted Donald Trump. She's been calling him out from the beginning. She's one of the few people who stood up to him. I'm with you on Mitch McConnell, but you're not going to put any of this on Nancy Pelosi.
No. I never said Nancy Pelosi, Tom. I said Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell.
Oh, I'm sorry. I completely misunderstood you, James.
No. I'm a progressive, buddy. You know that. What I'm saying is that if you and I go into a store and rob a store, and we come out of the store and you say, well, I'm doing a citizen's arrest, you're under arrest. Come on, now, that's a joke. And that is why the president, even though they may evoke the 25th Amendment, he will not be prosecuted because those guys are just as guilty. So they're not going to do anything with that. I'm sorry to say it, but that's the way it is.
James, I suspect that with regard to prosecution for insurrection, sedition, treason, the things that we saw yesterday and that we've been seeing on an ongoing basis ever since the election was over, and I would argue we've been seeing for 4 years, but, just to put a narrow point on this, Donald Trump, repeated attempts to discredit the American Republican system. I'm with you. I doubt anybody's going to be prosecuted for it, and I doubt any of these members of Congress are going to be held to account. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop calling for it. I think that these members of Congress need to be expelled, and we absolutely need to be prosecuting not just Trump, but the people around him. I think one of the reasons Mark Meadows, who is his chief of staff, who used to be part of the Cokehead Caucus, in Congress, the so-called Freedom Caucus, he was he was right up there with, Jim Jordan and these guys. Mark Meadows resigned yesterday, and I think he resigned not just because he's flipped out about, Trump has gone nuts. I think he resigned because he's afraid that he himself will go to jail. Or could be held accountable, or at the very least, the history will hold him accountable. James, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Kevin in Durham, North Carolina. Hey, Kevin, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I just want to say, just as a black man, yesterday I was so angry I was shaking. And the reason why is because of all the things that I didn't see. And to the guy that called earlier trying to draw a false equivalence, what I didn't see yesterday was tear gas. I didn't see pepper spray. I didn't see rubber bullets. I didn't see riot police. I didn't see any of that. What I saw was...
I didn't see handcuffs.
A mob. I didn't see a knee to the neck. I didn't see any of that. I saw a mob running into the U.S. Capitol building, and the police pretty much allowed it to happen. They ran up in there. They ransacked the place, spread COVID everywhere. U.S. representatives had to hide and shelter in place. And this all happened because this president incited them to do it. And that's why I'm so angry right now, Tom, because, I think I speak for most African Americans when I tell you, it's just being thrown in our face, the two Americas. Mm-hmm.
This is white privilege on parade, Kevin.
The privilege is just being thrown in our face. You and I both know if those had been a bunch of black people out there or Black Lives Matter protesters, it never would have gotten that far. They never would have gotten anywhere near the U.S. Capitol building.
James, just a few weeks ago or just a few months ago when it was Black Lives Matter protesters, they had the National Guard lined up man by man by man with shields and riot gear all the way around the Capitol. Remember that? I mean, where were those guys yesterday? Yeah. Yeah, Kevin, I'm sorry, we're hitting a break here and I can't control it, but excellent call. Thank you very much. 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Kind of processing what happened yesterday, what might be happening today, where we go forward from here. And will Congress respond to Chuck Schumer's call to impeach Trump? And welcome back. Let's see here. Frank in Staten Island, New York. Hey, Frank, what's up?
Hey, my newly elected congressperson, 2 days on the job, was one of the 120 Republicans that voted to interfere with other states' election process. So I went onto the website and I tried to email some of the other persons on that list. It turns out that I confirmed this with the clerk of the Congress, that the Congress persons have the opportunity to obfuscate their email address, not permit anyone not in their district to send them an email. So I was just curious, are you aware of any group or website, because I did some searches and they're pretty old, that kind of keeps up with this stuff where you could basically find out what the actual email addresses are of the Congress folks?
I don't know of any, Frank, and I'm guessing that any publicly published email addresses are not the ones that the representatives themselves are reading. They're being read by staff. I know a few members of Congress, and when I correspond with them by email, it's not an email address that is any kind of normal official email address. But they all should have, email addresses that are published on their website.
Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to point out, people that were listening on the radio, or whatever, is that when they did the first objection, and it was Arizona, and Vice President Pence says, "What senator is with you?" and Ted Cruz stood up, he got a standing ovation. He got a standing ovation in the Congress. That is so sad. That is just so.
Oh, it's beyond sad. It's blasphemous. It's terrible.
It's so sad.
I'm with you, Frank. Thank you for the call. Brian in Duval, Washington. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Boy, last night I did something I've never done before. I emailed my senator from Washington State, Patty Murray, and my representative, Susan Delbaney. And I'm paraphrasing myself here because I don't remember the exact wording. But what I said was, I urge you to demand of the vice president and the cabinet to remove the president, invoke the 25th Amendment, and remove him because he now represents a clear and present danger to the security of the United States due to the events yesterday.
Yep.
I've never done that before. And I urge everybody listening to your audience right now to do the same. Talk to your senators, talk to your representatives, and demand that they call the vice president up, get the vice president and the cabinet to remove this guy from office because he now represents a danger to the country.
Yeah, I'm completely with you, Brian, and I was very gratified. I mean, just about an hour ago, I got an email from Chuck Schumer's office saying that Senator Schumer is calling for either the 25th Amendment or impeachment. What I thought was kind of weird was it was a very passive language. Like Senator Schumer would essentially like Congress to do this. And I'm wondering, why aren't you introducing the resolution? Well, I get it. He can't introduce a resolution for impeachment in the Senate. It has to originate in the House. But I don't know how long this pressure can build on Democrats to do something about this. And I don't know if they're afraid that this will be the next thing that triggers the maggots. I just don't know.
Well, that's why people have the demand of their representatives. They have to do this. They have to do it now.
Yeah. I'm with you. Reach out to your elected representatives and demand that they get some steel in their spine. We'll be right back. You can help America return to democracy by telling friends and family how to listen to this and other great progressive programs. Tag you're it. So what makes Trump supporters Trump supporters? Good question, right? Well, Psychology Today did a deep dive into a whole bunch of literature on this and a number of studies and concluded that there were 5 characteristics that crossed right across virtually all Trump supporters. I do a deep dive on these on our video over at thomhartmann.com for the supporters of our program today. But here's essentially what it says. Number 1, they are authoritarians, by and large authoritarian followers. They want a strong father figure to make them feel safe. Number 2, social dominance orientation. They believe in a caste system and they think they should be in the top caste. Number 3, prejudice. They view people of other races poorly. Number 4, intergroup contact. Most of them have never experienced significant contact with people of another race or people, deeply different than them. And number 5, relative deprivation. They feel like they've been screwed. They're not sure why. And Trump tells them, oh, it's those brown people. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Trump's not only evil, he's dangerous and insane. The fact that the Proud Boys left a severed pig's head on Pelosi's house lawn and that they graffitied McConnell's house, this was all well orchestrated. When Trump met with that Proud Boy that he invited to the White House, I believe Trump gave him the layout of the Capitol because you can see on the surveillance the Proud Boys, they're searching for something. They go through a black suitcase in there. Thank God the ballots were not there. Then they go to Pelosi's office. I think it was all very well orchestrated. And the Proud Boys, I do know for a fact they flooded the internet with their directions. So, and Trump yesterday, he even called off the National Guard. That's why the National Guard's not there. He called them off yesterday. So everyone listening needs to call the White House and say we want Pence for the next 13 days. And I have the number. It's area code 202-456-1414 or 202-456-1111. This, I can't believe I'm saying it. I want Pence. I want Pence in there for the next 14 days.
Yeah.
And
although, you're basically, the two numbers you gave out were the White House switchboard and the White House comment line.
And they're answering.
But I can pretty much guarantee you that those people who are answering the phone, do not have the power to do anything. I mean, it's fine to call them. But more important right now, Jessica, is for you to be calling your two senators and whoever your representative is from Chicago.
This morning I've called Liz Cheney, I've called Mitt Romney. I think impeachment or the 25th Amendment needs to come from a Republican too. And one last thing that you will love, They're Coming to Take You Away needs to be Trump's song now. He's mentally...
From the 60s. Yes, they're coming to take me away. I remember it well. I was a kid. Jessica, thank you. Spot on. Greg in Tampa, Florida. Hey, Greg, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I certainly agree with the top-down approach of impeachment and or the 25th Amendment, but I think we also need to embrace a bottom-up approach from legal terms. If you recall, last September, Barr told the nation's AGs to be aggressive in charging violent crimes, including prosecuting them for plotting to overthrow the government. So yesterday when I was watching all of this nonsense, I heard two people identify themselves from Tampa, where I live. And I've been in touch with the U.S. Attorney from the Middle District of Florida, or been trying to get them to do what they need to do in terms of facial recognition software and such to identify these people and prosecute them for sedition. And I think if everyone would make noise and get in touch with their respective U.S. attorneys, that we could also approach it from that angle. Because
it's kind of hard to lobby U.S. attorneys, but right now Muriel Bowser, the mayor of Washington, D.C., she just did a press conference about an hour ago asking people to text or email information to her office that could be used to identify people who were involved in this thing at the Capitol building yesterday, presumably so that they can be arrested and held before they leave town today, right? And so, and she said everything that comes to them is also going to go to the FBI as well. So, it seems like that's a great place to start. You might want to check Mayor Bowser's office. It may be a little more direct route for that information if you have any information. Greg, thanks for the call. Bill in Garner, Iowa. Bill, we just have a little more than a half a minute. You got a quick one here?
Yeah, it was pretty much like all the people who were doing that yesterday in the Capitol, destroying it. Is Trump going to be able to, pardon all these guys for doing that?
I believe he would have to know their individual names, although after the Civil War, there was a general amnesty and it didn't name anybody's names. He may well be able to, and it's another strong reason to impeach him or remove him by the 25th Amendment, so he can't use that power to protect himself, his family, and his co-conspirators. Because I guarantee you, Bill, there are co-conspirators here. Yeah.
I pray that's going to happen.
Yeah, okay. Bill, thank you very much. I'm with you. And thanks for being brief. I mistimed myself. I still have one more minute. Diamond in Hollywood, California. You get the last minute this hour. What's up?
Oh, thank you, Tom. How are you? I think basically that there are Republicans already asking for the 25th Amendment. And we, either way, whether we whether we do nothing. If we do nothing, then basically the Proud Boys and whatever can feel compelled to do whatever. But if we 25th Amendment him, we still have that dilemma. And there's Martin Luther King Day coming up, and there's, the inauguration and everything. So I think we have to 25th Amendment him. And my dad basically had this funny thing to say yesterday. He said, what if they 25th Amendment him, and then he asked Pence to pardon him. And after what happened, Pence doesn't pardon him.
Yeah, which I think is a very realistic scenario, Diamond. This ain't over. That's the thing. That's, if there's any message, and Diamond, thank you for the call. If there's any message that I want to convey to you, it's this is not over. And large parts of this are not going to be over probably in our lifetimes, now that Trump has unleashed this on the land.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code TOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code TOM.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-sized energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Koch public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. He does not want this cash, the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. During the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said, certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Koch more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Koch's products without ever seeing Koch's name attached. Koch refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Koch is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Koch makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book, Kochland, by Christopher Leonard.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, this is pretty amazing. This John Wagner writing for the Washington Post. This is mind-boggling. Actually, this is by Josh Dawsey and Felicia Somnes for the Washington Post. Donald Trump briefly called in to the Republican National Committee's winter meeting Thursday morning. That's this morning. And received a loud and overwhelmingly enthusiastic reception when RNC Chair Romney McDaniel put him on speakerphone, according to people in the room. "We love you," some in the room yelled. Addressing RNC members by phone as they held a private members-only breakfast at the Ritz-Carlton on Amelia Island in Florida, Trump said that he had heard that the news media had falsely reported he would not be speaking. He told the RNC members he wanted to speak, was sorry to miss the event, and looked forward to seeing them in person. He made no mention of Wednesday's violence at the Capitol. Amazing. He gets cheered by the Republican National Committee, the RNC. It's just breathtaking. Representative Kinzinger, a Republican from Illinois, says time to invoke the 25th Amendment. There are now, I have seen two different sets of articles of impeachment, And I've been looking for links to the actual articles themselves. Instead, what I'm seeing on Twitter and in social media are pictorial pictures of them that I can't print, and I can't compare these documents. So I don't know if they're different articles of impeachment or how they differ. But I think this train is rolling down this track fairly quickly right now. The other thing, though, that I think we really need to deal with is the fact that Senator Hawley, Senator Hyde-Smith, Senator Marshall, brand new Senator Tuberville, Senator Cruz, and Senator John Kennedy all were supporting Donald Trump yesterday after all this happened. Now, I realize that the subtext to an awful lot of this is that the Republicans know that if they simply laid out their agenda, if they said, hey, we're the Republican Party, we think corporations should be allowed to poison your air and water, sell your kids toys that break, blow up, or kill them. We don't think that corporations should be regulated. We think that pollution is just a fine thing. We don't think that global warming exists. We don't think that the minimum wage should ever go above $7.25 an hour. We hate unions. We hate working people. We simply want tax cuts for billionaires, tax cuts for giant corporations, and deregulation. If they were to come out and say that, nobody would ever vote for them. And enough people in America have figured out that that's what the Republican Party is and has been for 40 years now, that increasingly they're not voting for them. Because of this, the Republican Party is left with two choices. Number one, they could follow the advice of their own post-mortem after the Mitt Romney loss to Barack Obama some, 8 years ago, and become a party that is more inclusive and a little more mainstream American when it comes to, social values and things like that. Or they can prevent as many black, brown, young, and old, black and brown people and young and old white people, and city dwellers, people who generally tend to vote Democratic, they can prevent as many of those people from voting as possible. And the way that they have been preventing people from voting for the better part of 50 years now is by claiming that if they don't have really rigorous rules and lots of hoops that people have to jump through in order to vote, we're going to make it harder for you to vote than for you to, do anything else, right? Than to pay your taxes, certainly. We're going to make it that if they don't do that, they're not going to win elections. And so in order to be able to prevent people who might vote Democratic from voting, the Republicans have to perpetuate this myth that there is voter fraud, which there isn't. George W. Bush had a commission that looked into this. Donald Trump had a commission that looked into this. In fact, Mr. KKK himself, Chris Kobach of Kansas, yes, they all start with K's, led the thing, the commission right out of the White House and said, okay, we're going to find that voter fraud. You've got the Attorney General of Texas who put $1 million reward out for any if you catch anybody committing voter fraud, I'll pay you $1 million. And the Attorney General of Pennsylvania caught one guy who registered his dead mother and then voted for Donald Trump in her name. One guy. And the AG of Pennsylvania continues to say to the AG or maybe it's the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania, continues to say to the Attorney General of Texas, where's my $1 million? But that's how frequently it happens. One case. Down in Georgia, Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger pointed out, 3-4 days ago? They had found one case of a person voting in the name of one of his dead parents. Again, a Republican voter. This is how frequently this happens. Maybe once in one state, no elections are changed because of voter fraud. There basically is no such thing as voter fraud for all practical purposes. But there is election fraud. There is where the people who run the election say, in this neighborhood, we're going to have half as many machines, so people will have to stand in line for 10 hours. In this neighborhood, we're going to close half the polling places, so people can't even find the polling places, and then they have to stand in line for 10 hours. Oh, in this neighborhood, we're going to knock 1 out of every 3 people who are registered to vote off the voting rolls by saying that they've moved out of state. This is what Republicans have been doing for 50 years now. Karl Rove invented a whole strategy back in the 70s and 80s. It was called caging, where the Republican Party would mail out a postcard to you, to registered Democrats, saying, if you don't return this card, I'll assume you've moved. Have you moved? Please return this card to let us know if you've moved or not, right? Things like that. And when the card didn't come back, they would challenge those votes and have those people removed from the voting rolls. The Democrats in the 1980s got a restraining order against this strategy of Karl Rove's and the Republican parties. And it lasted right up until the Supreme Court essentially blew it up during, I believe, during the George W. Bush administration, might have been during the Obama administration. And so, well, in fact, just 2 years ago, or maybe last year, Ohio was caging. Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, was, overseeing an operation where the Secretary of State was running a caging operation to throw Ohioans off the voting rolls if they lived in big cities, if they had names that sounded like they were black or Hispanic. And the Supreme Court said, oh, that's just fine. Well, actually, the conservatives on the Supreme Court said, oh, that's just fine. The liberals on the Supreme Court said, what? This is outrageous. But they were outvoted. Which brings me to the point of all this. The reason why Hawley, Hyde-Smith, Marshall, Tuberville, Cruz, and Kennedy in the Senate, and 120 some odd guys in the House, men and women in the House, came right out and said, we still, we're worried about voter fraud and we want a commission, is because they need to keep the con going. They need a rationale to be able to pass more restrictive laws in those states that they control so that they can maintain their control over a long period of time. They've been able to do this now for 40 years. They just basically lost control in Georgia, in large part thanks to the great efforts of Stacey Abrams in getting hundreds of thousands of largely African-American voters in Georgia registered to vote and helping them get out to vote. Hey, getting out the vote. Republicans have been doing get out the vote efforts vigorously for years. In the 1960s, my dad was doing this, but it was all among white people because they were Republicans. And they're still doing it with white people. If it's not obvious what this strategy is, it needs to be made obvious. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Stick around. We'll pick up your phone calls right after this. And welcome back. And Marianne in St. Louis, Missouri. Hey, Marianne, what's up?
Well, I was wondering, how would I go about addressing my seditious Senator Josh Hawley? Everybody should be senators to, let them know that they want the 25th Amendment invoked or whatever. But how do you address a seditious senator?
You contact the Democratic Party in Missouri and you say, okay, what can I do to help get Josh Hawley unelected?
Okay.
Because that's going to be, there's nothing that you can do individually to convince Josh Hawley to change his mind. Josh Hawley is an ambitious, I'm guessing, psychopath, a person who thinks he's the center of the universe, who has no empathy and no understanding, doesn't care about his country or anything other than his own advancement. I think he made that eminently clear yesterday. And so right now, short of, the other thing you could do is you could contact everybody in leadership, and that would be in the Senate at the very least. It would be Chuck Schumer in the House. Well, it should be in the Senate. It would be basically contact Chuck Schumer and say that you think that Josh Hawley, as a Missourian, as a citizen of Missouri, you think that Josh Hawley should be at the very least censured and perhaps expelled from the Senate for what he did.
Okay, thanks.
But
I will do that.
What's the old saying? Revenge is winning is the best revenge. The number one thing to do, since you live in Missouri and he's your senator, is to contact the Missouri Democratic Party and say, I will knock on doors, I will make phone calls, I will stuff envelopes, I'll do whatever I can. Help us find a good candidate to replace Josh Hawley, and let's get moving. And and frankly, I think that the reason that Claire McCaskill lost that seat to Josh Hawley is because she had been, quote, one of the centrist senators. She had been one of those people who was always trying to, cut the baby down the middle, to be nice and friendly with the Republicans and go along to get along, and opposing radical things like Medicare for all. And frankly, I think that if the Democratic Party were to put up a real progressive against Josh Hawley, because obviously this is a base election going on, then Missouri would end up with a Democratic senator. So I would carry that message to the local Democratic Party too. Does that make sense, Marianne?
Yes, yes, it does. Thanks for your input. I will act on it.
Okay, great. Let me know. Give us a call back and let us know how it works out.
Will do.
And thank you, Marianne. Okay, great talking with you. I mean, this is what we need to be doing, right? I mean, certainly there's enough outrage in the moment, and certainly, yes, Chuck Schumer. This is he said the quickest and most effective way it can be done to remove this president from office would be to immediately invoke the 25th Amendment. If the vice president and cabinet refuse to stand up, Congress should impeach the president. This is what Chuck Schumer said. Well, you know what? You think you don't have agency? I mean, anyway, we'll be right back. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Fair and only slightly unbalanced. Stick around. We'll be right back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, we have a new video for supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. It's about curing type 1 diabetes, which is a pretty amazing thing. Type 1 diabetes is where the cells in the pancreas that produce insulin are actually destroyed. They're gone. Type 1 diabetics, typically it shows up in childhood, and without insulin, people die from it fairly young. With insulin, they can live a good long life, but a University of Alberta researcher, Dr. James Shapiro, back in 1990 pioneered a transplant system. Now, the problem with that was that people had to use immunosuppressive drugs for the rest of their lives because they had just gotten, a partial pancreas transplant from another person. But now he's successfully on mice worked out a way of actually curing type 1 diabetes. We can't do it legally here in the United States, but they're doing it in Canada. It's amazing. You can check it out at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. What can we as individuals do? I got this press release from Chuck Schumer. He's calling for the 25th Amendment. And then he says, if the vice president and cabinet refuse to stand up, Congress should impeach the president. Should? You are Congress. Come on. It's like, okay. And, and then we've got these 6 senators who have all declared that their loyalty to essentially fascism, to one-man rule, to strongman rule, to authoritarianism, to oligarchy is stronger than their loyalty to America or the Constitution. And that's Josh Hawley, obviously, Ted Cruz, obviously, John Kennedy from Louisiana, obviously, Hyde Smith, Marshall, and now we've got this brand new one from Alabama, Tommy Tuberville, the guy who beat Doug Jones. So sad. So sad. So Anyhow, Kathy in Lansing, Michigan. Hey, it says here you wanted to talk about Tuberville by coincidence. What's up?
Yeah. This is how stupid this guy is. About a month ago, somebody asked him the three branches of government, and this guy said the House, the Senate, and the President.
Wow.
And the only reason he's
right up there with Ron Johnson.
Yeah, and the only reason he's in the Senate is because he was a football coach, and he got fired because he couldn't beat Nick Saban.
Jeez. I didn't know, Kathy. I don't follow Alabama politics. But I'm telling you, what needs to happen in Alabama, Alabama needs a Stacey Abrams.
Absolutely.
You know, there are a lot of people who have been so disenfranchised for so many years that they've kind of given up and checked out of politics, and they need to be brought back into the political world. And, when Acorn was doing this, they got taken down by Republicans. This was, of course, during the Trump administration, or was it during Obama? In any case, Acorn got taken down, with phony video from Project Veritas and all that stuff. And there's nothing there. I mean, there's very little left in terms of large, substantial, well-funded movements to register voters, except for what Stacey Abrams has been doing in Georgia. She's shown how it can be done in Georgia. It needs to be done in Alabama, in Louisiana, in South Carolina, in North Carolina, in Florida. Right across Alabama, right across the South. We need massive voter registration drives. It's time.
Then why don't we have her become the head of the DNC?
I think that's beneath her. I think that she's going to run for governor in 2 years in Georgia, and she's going to win. And from the governorship, she's probably going to go to the Senate. And from the Senate, she may well run for president. This is somebody who's on her way up. She's a young woman. She's got an extraordinary career ahead of her. She is whip smart. She's one of the smartest people in American politics. She's one of the most dedicated. She has a deep level of conviction and belief in the fate and future of this country. She's absolutely one of my heroes, Stacey Abrams.
Absolutely. Can we put her in the cabinet?
Yeah. But I'm guessing she's not in the cabinet because she wants to stay in Georgia and run for governor. But, I'm not privy to the inside of those conversations, but that's just a guess. Anyway, thank you. Thank you very much for the call, Kathy. Great to hear from you. Nicole in Woodstock, New York. Hey, Nicole, what's up?
Hi. I'm calling you to talk about how our so-called president responded to an attempted coup in the White House. And I was watching it last night, and I looked at a lot of footage. What shocked me, not really shocked me, I mean, it wasn't really that surprising, was that the president, the so-called president of the United States, said to his cult followers, I feel your pain, I love you, and you are special. Those are the three things he ended his short little pat on the back speech to his cult followers. This should be enough for anyone in Congress who wants to get him out with the 25th Amendment to do it. And they can't drag their feet.
Well, Congress doesn't do the 25th Amendment, Nicole. Congress does impeachment. But yes, I agree with you. The 25th Amendment has to be initiated by Mike Pence, by the vice president, and then it has to be signed off on by the cabinet first. But yes, I totally understand and agree with you.
Fire under those people because they drag their feet on everything. We don't have time to talk about this. As you've brought up many times, he has 13 days. There's a massive amount of horror that could happen within those 13 days, and it seems like people have no idea. It's as if something happens and then they just go on with their lives. We need to get
he could start World War III.
out of office. Exactly.
So write this number down, anybody listening, because Nicole is absolutely right. Write this number down. This is the number for the switchboard at Congress. You can talk to any member of Congress you want, or at least leave a message in their office. It's 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. Call Congress now, 202-224-3121. Impeach now. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And to call your member of Congress, 202-224-3121. And the Senate as well.
Reading today from a book by Four Arrows, also known as Donald Jacobs or Don Jacobs. It's titled Point of Departure, Returning to Our More Authentic Worldview for Education and Survival. This is from Chapter 3, Community-Oriented Self-Authorship. Knowing the power of intentional and unintentional trance-based learning and how the latter can make us susceptible to believing untoward communication from authority figures, we can understand one reason self-authorship is important in the indigenous worldview. When we are in control of our thinking and trust our intuitive insights, our natural trance awareness helps prevent misdirection from external influences. It gives us the authority for what we can then instill in our minds to achieve. If someone such as a trusted shaman or psychologist has, certain skills at hypnosis, we might tentatively authorize him or her to help us form the most effective images, but we do so with full awareness. More important than avoiding negative influence from perceived authority figures, however, is the self-authorship via indigenous worldview that gives high degrees of individual autonomy to people while at the same time assuring that people use their freedoms to help their communities. In the indigenous worldview, the highest authority for all decisions comes from one's personal, honest reflection on lived experience, with the understanding that everything is related. It is this understanding that makes a distinction between self-authorship, as it is generally perceived in the dominant worldview, and that of the indigenous one. Self-authorship is always ultimately in the service of the greater good in the latter. Self-authorship in indigenous ways of thinking comes from knowing that the highest experience for decisions comes from honest reflection on lived experience in light of realizing that everything is related in life, and this interconnectedness must be a part of all decisions. Michael Anthony Hart gets to these ideas about inner authority coming from such reflection. Through inward exploration, tapping into creative forces that run through all life, individuals come to subjectively experience a sense of wholeness. This exploration is an experience in context, where the context is the self in connection with happenings, and the findings from such experience is knowledge. Happenings may be facilitated through rituals or ceremonies that incorporate dreaming, visioning, meditation, and prayer. The findings from such experiences are encoded in community praxis as a way of synthesizing knowledge derived from introspection. Hence, indigenous peoples' cultures recognize and affirm the spiritual through practical applications of inner space. Such a holistic understanding of accessing, trusting, and exercising our inner authority is the source of the creativity and knowledge synthesis we need for addressing our global problems. While Ehrman refers to this inner authority with the Cree term mamatawisin, which is the capacity to tap the creative life forces of the inner space by the use of all the faculties that consume our being, it is to exercise inwardness. This understanding is missing from our dominant worldview, where objective-based outward exploration is sought for guidance rather than introspective knowledge development. Dependence on external authority is the rule in spite of the call to question authority that has always resonated on the fringes. Under the dominant worldview, obedience trumps community-oriented self-authorship. Decision-making is rarely a holistic process, nor does it utilize alternative states of awareness, deep reflection, and community praxis. The random quotations below, selected from an internet search, reveal that obedience to authority is common under the dominant worldview. Obedience to lawful authority is the foundation of manly characteristics by Robert E. Lee. All religions have based morality on obedience, Alexander Herzen. Obedience brings peace in decision-making, James Faust. Justice is the insurance that we have on our lives and property. Obedience is the premium we pay for it, William Penn. I was not born to be free. I was born to adore and obey, C.S. Lewis. Every game has rules. Life's a game that has its respective rules. Obey the rules, win the game. Israel Ahavor. A wolf cannot have more than one head, or it tears itself apart. Con Iggulden. From a social dissident on the fringe, Noam Chomsky wrote, any dictator would admire the uniformity and obedience of the U.S. media. From an indigenous-raised Lakota, Oyessa, the American Indian was an individualist in religion as in war. Reliance on external authority is not only the bedrock of choices in mainstream society and the main approach to moral development, but it also gives guides jurisprudence and conflict resolution. Authorized punishment or revenge is a primary goal for wrongdoing. Under indigenous worldview, bringing offenders back into community via affected members of the community is the goal. This relational approach expands the circle of land and seeks input from the wide circle of relevant people. Spiritual resources are employed via prayer or song, and subjectivity is as important as objectivity. Hart emphasizes this relationship as emphasizing spirit and spirituality, and in turn a sense of communitism and respectful individualism. And then he goes on about the indigenous worldview and how it relates to what we would call communism. Point of departure by 4 arrows.
Just deployed Patriot missiles to Iraq and pointed them at Iran. Has gone out of his way to threaten Iran, saying that they will pay a very heavy price. You know, if any of their proxy groups, any of the Iranian-supported militias or groups, this is basically the Shiites, the majority of the population of Iraq. In Iraq, if any of them were to attack American forces, Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo will use this as an excuse to launch a war against Iran. This is insane. The New York Times is reporting military commanders, the Pentagon has ordered military commanders to plan for an escalation of American combat in Iraq, in the region, and, quote, prepare a campaign to destroy an Iranian-backed militia group that has threatened more attacks against American troops. You know, we crippled their country with sanctions, and now we're threatening a war so that Trump can get reelected. There's a video about it over at thomhartmann.com for our supporters. Well, welcome back. 35 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. There is one thing that I just wanted to share with you very quickly that I'm pretty sure that this is in the 14th Amendment. And I've got my pocket Constitution here. And because the 14th Amendment, one of the 3 amendments that was passed after the Civil War to basically deal with the Civil War and re-enfranchise or enfranchise for the first time people of color in the United States. And the 14th Amendment, most of us are familiar with the first part. You know, everybody has access to equal protection under the law. But Section 3 is interesting. This is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress. And then there's a whole bunch of other positions that you can't hold. I won't jump through all that. Let me just start over, letting you know in advance. I'm taking out all the, they list all these, elected positions all the way down to state, right? So, but it starts out, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress who shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution of the United States, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Now, this, of course, was for letting people who had fought on the side of the Confederacy run for Congress from the southern states as time went on, but that little caveat at the very end. But I think that what we've got right here is a fairly clear case of people engaging in insurrection against the United States. Anyway, somebody also from Alabama tweeted me to say that Tommy Tuberville is actually pronounced Tommy Tuberville, like, Tuberville. So I'm assuming that that's the case. Anyhow, picking up your phone calls, Bill in LaSalle, Michigan. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hi, Tom. One of your callers, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, just fine.
One of your callers already touched on the subject, but I think that they should be impeaching him immediately so that he can not pardon any of the people that were involved yesterday or anybody else that he has on his pardon list. That
I agree.
The 25th Amendment might also cover this if he's immediately removed. But that is also going to take some action by Congress, where if the House of Representatives impeaches him, it has nothing to do with the Senate. He's under impeachment. He can't pardon anybody. That's my understanding.
Well, that's an interpretation. It's never been tested by the Supreme Court. And earlier, I said that when Ossoff and Warnock get sworn in, then the control of the Senate changes. I was wrong. The control of the Senate changes on the 20th when Kamala Harris becomes vice president. Even if it's a 50-50 Senate, Mitch McConnell still runs it, which means that if you want him impeached, yes, of course, the articles of impeachment have to start in the House. And there are already articles that have been proposed and laid down, and I guarantee you Nancy Pelosi is carefully looking this over. But then it goes to the Senate, and it's up to Mitch McConnell whether it gets handled expeditiously or whether it gets drawn out past the 20th. And this is going to be a test for Mitch McConnell.
It's my understanding that if he is impeached, and impeached just means that the House that has brought rules of impeachment against him. If he's impeached, which he's already been impeached, if he's been impeached while under that investigation for impeachment, he has lost his ability to pardon. It's my understanding.
Yes,
might be incorrect.
That is my understanding as well, Bill, but it has never been tested. But the provision in the Constitution that gives the president this king-like power to pardon people. You go back and read the debates on in Philadelphia in 1787, and they were concerned about a president pardoning somebody who assisted him in committing a corrupt act. And they assumed that if a president committed a corrupt act, that Congress would impeach him, and therefore they wanted to prevent him from from pardoning people who might be witnesses against him. And so it says that the president shall have the power of impeachment except during times of impeachment. Now, the during times of impeachment part is what we don't know. Does that mean from the day that the impeachment articles are dropped on the floor of the House? Does it mean from the day that they have been voted on by the entire House and he has been officially impeached? Does it mean even right now because he has been impeached, although he hasn't been removed from Congress? That's pretty much, everybody's pretty much dismissed that. Or does it mean that, when it's being debated in the Senate or after he's been impeached? Well, obviously, after he's been impeached, he can't pardon people. So it's got to be defining that interregnum there. But exactly when that is, nobody can say for sure because, like I said, it's never gone before the Supreme Court. But, Bill, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I think, the 25th Amendment is a fallback. This impeachment takes away his pension. It takes away his pardon power. It takes away his ability to ever run for public office, ever. It strips him of, all kinds of things. I mean, he needs to be impeached. Cynthia in Wilmington, North Carolina. Hey, Cynthia, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. I'm holding the two realities of yesterday in my hands. I woke up yesterday to Joy Comes in the Morning, the election of Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, and the promise it holds for progressives to finally have the branches of government, the White House, the Senate, the House, to push for bold, progressive, structural changes in policy. But in my right hand, I hold the three-pronged convergence that created the heinous, despicable display at the Capitol yesterday. The first is this hideous president who needs to be removed immediately. 13 days is an eternity with all he can do. God knows what he's doing in the moments we're speaking. The second is every seditious member of the Senate and the House needs to be named, called out, and I think expelled. And the third is every sponsor of these right-wing media outlets that have worked in collusion with the GOP to create this horrified cult that literally believes what they're doing is right and patriotic. We need major boycott of every freaking business that supports right-wing media. I'm in my 60s. I'm a lifelong progressive. I've seen a lot, and I am clutching my left hand to my heart, Warnock and Ossoff and what can be. But it will not happen if what's in my right hand isn't destroyed. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I agree. Cynthia, you just kind of recapped the last hour and a half of my show. I completely agree on all points, and I think you said it very, very well. Howard in Los Angeles. Hey, Howard, what's on your mind? Howard in Los Angeles? I'm not hearing Howard. Let's try Carrie in New Windsor, New York. Hey, Carrie, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Happy New Year. Regarding when the Trump terrorists, or some Trump terrorists, stormed the Capitol yesterday, and then Trump supported them so much that he was banned from social media, I have three questions really quick. Did anyone see any footage of any arrests yesterday? Did anyone see any footage of any Trump terrorists carrying... Yeah, but did anybody see any footage of that, right? Because, who controls most of the media? And then did anybody see any footage of any of the Trump terrorists that were there yesterday, even outside the Capitol, with guns? Because there's this Newsweek article about, they knew in advance that this was going to happen. Right. And then third question, and then a really great compliment for one of your callers earlier today. The third question is, can anybody please make stickers that say "Stop the Coup" but spell coup K-U? Because we're running out of time. and then the last thing is Frank from Staten Island. You are so brave, the guy who called earlier, because there are so many times in Staten Island. And then the Newsweek article is Washington, D.C. It's from Monday. Washington, D.C. bans guns at pro-Trump election protest scheduled for this week, and they posted notices saying within 1,000 feet, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah.
Okay. Carrie, I'm not sure what that all was, but we'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Because I think Frank was the guy who was saying, wasn't that Antifa doing it or something? Maybe I'm wrong. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Elaine Chao, Mitch McConnell's wife, the Secretary of Transportation, a member of Trump's cabinet, just resigned. What's interesting is that if they're planning a 25th Amendment replacement of Trump, she's no longer in the pot if her resignation was effective immediately. So that's an interesting one. I mean, there's a bunch of interesting stuff going on here. Ed in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Ed, thanks for listening to X-Ray FM. What's up?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to share with you, listening to all these reports from the people in Congress and their staff all having to do a lockdown. It reminds me of what our school children have had to do for the past several decades. Maybe this is a wake-up call for Congress that maybe they should pay attention to how Second Amendment rights have been perhaps a little too loose, a little too easy for lunatics and crazy people to walk around with guns in our country.
Yeah, it certainly does cause one to think that at least semi-automatic or fully potentially fully automatic weapons and assault weapons. Let's just call them that. But I don't think that that's a conversation that anybody's going to want to have right now, Ed. I think this is more about the immediate crisis.
Maybe Congress will. This experience will wake them up to the concept that perhaps it is time to enforce laws. That when it says you don't carry in Washington D.C., that's what it means, and enforce it.
Yeah, well, Mayor Bowser is all about that. And if you didn't catch your press conference this morning, I'm sure it's on social media someplace. It's really worth watching. Ed, thanks for the call. Richard in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Well, good morning, Tom. Happy New Year, isn't it? Interesting about Elaine Chao. I was quite expecting that. I thought she was going to wait till the 20th so she could file for unemployment.
Yeah. She's only worth a few $100 million. She really needs it.
Well, you know how they are.
Yeah.
About this situation stemming from yesterday, it's not surprising that this happened. It's been brewing towards this for days, weeks, months, and really an entire generation. So this is not over. It's not going to take a long time. It's going to take generations, perhaps, to go ahead and deal with this. But in the meantime, Mr. Trump, if he doesn't have any grace, he should resign. That's what an honorable person would do. But he's not going to do that. And he can't do that because he still needs to go ahead and pardon more people. He needs to go ahead and set up the remainder of his payoffs, and he needs to set up his exit flight.
Yeah. Well, he may have already set that up. You know, that airport in Scotland has been told to be on alert for the president's plane arriving on the 19th. The Prime Minister or the First Minister of Scotland has come out and said that she doesn't want him there.
That's right.
But I think he's just going to, if he goes there, he's just going to go there to change planes and go to some country that doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States.
Perhaps there'll be a nice place for him in Russia. He's been one of their best promoters over these past 4 years and more.
I would put Russia and Saudi Arabia at the top of the list of places where Donald Trump may well go if he needs a hidey hole. There's probably other countries as well. Richard, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. Coming up on the Science Revolution is Dr. Edwin C. May for an in-depth interview on how the federal government used ESP to spy on foreign governments. In brief, the U.S. military and intelligence communities funded a 20-year program to collect intelligence during the Cold War by using so-called psychics. Did it work? Was it successful? What happened and what can we learn from it? Dr. Edwin C. May also talks about the broader implications of ESP and psychics. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are found. So in January of 1861, Jefferson Davis, a senator from Virginia, I believe, got up and gave a speech. Now, this was before the secession had happened, had been completed. It was at the beginning of the stages of secession. And he said, Mississippi has heard proclaimed the theory that all men are created free and equal, and that this made the basis of an attack upon her social institutions. Now, he was speaking to Mississippi's argument that they wanted to secede from the Union because because Abraham Lincoln wanted to end slavery. Okay, so let me reread that. Mississippi has heard proclaimed the theory that all men are created free and equal, and that this is the basis of an attack upon our institutions. The sacred Declaration of Independence has been invoked to maintain the position of the equality of the races, but it makes no reference to the slave. And then he goes on into this long rant about this. The newspapers at the time noted the audience wept openly and gave him rapturous applause. But then in July, when the Senate reconvened, they said, okay, that's it. I've had enough. This is from the Stamford Advocate, a newspaper, an op-ed by Gillian Brockwell. When the Senate reconvened in July, the remaining members had had enough. Senator Daniel Clark of New Hampshire proposed a resolution to expel 10 senators on the grounds that they were, quote, engaged in a conspiracy for the destruction of the union and government, or with full knowledge of such conspiracy, have failed to advise the government of its progress or aid in its suppression. And they expelled the 2 senators from Arkansas. They expelled the 2 senators from North Carolina. They expelled the 2 senators from Texas. They expelled the 2 senators from Virginia. Plus, they expelled Senator Chestnut of South Carolina and Senator Nicholson of Tennessee. And then 4 months later, they expelled 4 more, including Breckinridge of Kentucky. It's time for the Senate to take seriously what Josh Hawley did yesterday. Lita in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Hey, Lita, what's up?
Hello. My question is regarding the enforcement of the 25th Amendment. Because the 25th Amendment requires a majority of the cabinet, is that correct?
Yeah, the sequence is first the vice president declares it, then a majority of the cabinet votes yes. At that point, the president is considered to be temporarily without power. Then it goes to, and I'd have to look up the 25th Amendment to see if it goes to the House and Senate or just to the House. I think it just goes to the House. And they make a decision, basically, as I recall.
Yeah, but my question is, there are so many, are there enough confirmed cabinet members to even make that possible, the second step possible? Because there are so many acting members.
Right, but the 25th Amendment just simply says a majority, of the vote.
But it doesn't say whether they are confirmed. It's assumed that they are confirmed.
That's correct, and I'm looking through it right now to see if the word quorum exists anywhere here. Although a quorum, see, here it is. He should be, whenever the vice president, a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, which it has not. So it would have to be the executive departments, which is the cabinet. Transmit to the president pro tem of the Senate and the Speaker of the House their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the duties. The vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting president. Thereafter, when the president transmits to the Speaker pro tem, this would be now Mike Pence sending to the Speaker pro tem of the Senate and the House his written declaration that no inability exists, he shall resume. Okay, so Pence has to declare he's good. If the Congress, within 21 days after the receipt of the latter declaration, determines by 2/3 vote of both houses that the president is unable to discharge the powers, the vice president shall continue. So it's a 2/3 vote of both the House and Senate. I'm sorry I didn't have that right at the top of my brain, Lita. But that 21-day provision means that basically what could happen right now, if I'm reading this right, and I'm not an authority on the 25th Amendment, but it's certainly, I just read the plain language of it to you on the air here. It appears that if Pence were to get a simple majority of the cabinet members to say, okay, Trump is out of here, he's incapacitated. He notifies the Speaker of the House and the Senate and the President pro tem of the Senate, which would otherwise be the Vice President, but this would be the temporary President of the Senate, which I think is Chuck Grassley. He notifies them, and they have 21 days to react. And during that period of time, the President is not in power unless Congress meets and overturns that. So if I'm understanding this correctly, and if there's anybody who's a real 25th Amendment scholar who has dug deep into this stuff in the past, let me know if I'm missing anything here. But it seems like it wouldn't even require a vote of Congress if that's the case, because the vice president and the cabinet have this 21-day period. But we're hitting the top of the hour here in about 30 seconds, Lita. I'm going to reread it carefully, and I'll come back on the other side.
Okay.
And we can talk about it.
It's just the acting versus confirmed is where my hitch in the giddy up is.
Yeah. And I think that's that 21-day window. Keep in mind, I don't think that the 25th Amendment was written so much to deal with, this kind of situation. I think that what they were doing is they were looking back at the stroke that Woodrow Wilson had, the stroke that Franklin Roosevelt had, Jack Kennedy being shot, Eisenhower had a heart attack. and he was out for a while. Nixon ran the government. Nobody even knew it until after the fact. That's the kind of stuff that they were trying to deal with. Lita, thank you so much for the call. We'll be back and continue the conversation about what's going on, what we can do about it. And by the way, the number for the House and Senate, 202-224-3121. Let them know what you think.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We humans have got to get a whole lot smarter, says Elon Musk, the billionaire founder of Tesla Automobiles.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code TOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code TOM.
For the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, it's Waking the Witch, Reflections on Women, Magic, and Power by Pam Grossman. This is from the introduction. Witches have always walked among us, populating societies and storyscapes across the globe for thousands of years. From Circe to Hermione, from Morgan Le Fay to Marie Laveau, the witch has long existed in the tales we tell about ladies with strange powers who can harm or heal. And although people of all genders have been considered witches, it's a word that is now usually associated with women. Throughout most of history, she has someone to fear, an uncanny other who threatens our safety or manipulates reality for her own mercurial purposes. She's a pariah, a persona non grata, a boogie woman to defeat and discard. Although she's often been deemed a destructive entity, in actuality, a witchy woman has historically been far more susceptible to attack than an inflictor of violence herself. As with other terrifying outsiders, she occupies a paradoxical role in cultural consciousness as both vicious aggressor and vulnerable prey. Over the past 150 years or so, however, the witch has done another magic trick by turning from a fright into a figure of inspiration. She is now as likely to be the heroine of your favorite TV show as she is its villain. She might show up in the form of your Wiccan co-worker or the beloved musician who gives off a sorceress vibe in videos or on stage. There's also a chance that she is you, and that witch is an identity you've taken upon yourself for any number of reasons, heartfelt or flippant, public or private. Today, more women than ever are choosing the way of the witch, whether literally or symbolically. They're floating down catwalks and sidewalks in gauzy black clothing and adorning themselves with Pinterest-worthy pentagrams and crystals. They're filling up movie theaters to watch witchy films and gathering in back rooms and backyards to do rituals, consult tarot cards, and set life-altering intentions. They're marching in the streets with "Hex the Patriarchy" placards and casting spells each month to try to constrain the commander-in-chief. Year after year, articles keep proclaiming it's the season of the witch, as journalists try to wrap their heads around the mushrooming witch trend. And all of this begs the question, why? Why do witches matter? Why are they seemingly everywhere right now? What exactly are they? And why the hell won't they go away? I get asked such things over and over, and you would think that after a lifetime of studying and writing about witches, as well as hosting a witch-themed podcast and being a practitioner of witchcraft myself, my answers would be succinct. In fact, I find that the more I work with the witch, the more complex she becomes. Hers is a slippery spirit. Try to pin her down and she'll only recede further into the dark, deep wood. I do know this for sure, though. Show me your witches, and I'll show you your feelings about women. The fact that the resurgence of feminism and the popularity of the witch are ascending at the same time is no coincidence. The two are reflections of each other. That said, this current witch wave is nothing new. I was a teen in the 1990s, the decade that brought us such pop culture as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Charmed, and The Craft. Not to mention riot girls and third-wave feminists who taught me that female power could come in a variety of colors and sexualities. I learned that women could lead a revolution while wearing lipstick and combat boots, and sometimes even a cloak. But my own witchly awakening came at an even earlier age. Morganville, New Jersey, where I was raised, was a solidly suburban town, but it retained enough natural land features back then to still feel a little bit scruffy in spots. We had a small patch of woods in our backyard that abutted a horse farm, and the two were separated by a wisp of running water that we could cross via a plank of wood. When we were little, my older sister Emily and I would sometimes venture to the other side where we could feed the horses, an act that still scares me to this day, and pick fistfuls of clover. But the majority of our time was spent on our side of the stream, threading ourselves through the thicket of trees that served as our personal forest. In one corner of the yard, a giant puddle would form whenever it rained, surrounded by a border of ferns. We called this spot our magical place. That it would vanish and then reappear only added to its mystery. It was a portal to the unknown. These woods are where I first remember doing magic, entering that state of deep play where imaginative action becomes reality. I would spend hours out there creating rituals with rocks and sticks, drawing secret symbols in the dirt, losing all track of time. It was a space that felt holy and wild, yet still strangely safe. As we age, we're supposed to stop filling our heads with such nonsense. Unicorns are to be traded in for Barbie dolls, though both are mythical creatures to be sure. We lose our tooth fairies, walk away from our wizards. Dragons get slain on the altar of our youth. Most kids grow out of their magic phase. I grew further into mine. My grandma Trudy was a librarian at the West Long Branch Library, which meant I got to spend many a long afternoon lurking between the 001.9 and 135 Dewey Decimal sections, reading about Bigfoot and dream interpretation and Nostradamus. Waking the Witch by Pam Grossman.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. This is just an absolutely remarkable day. Louise was asking me just a little bit during the break, actually. You know, where did you hear that the Republican National Committee got a phone call? They were holding a meeting down in Florida this morning. They presumably still are holding a meeting down in Florida. This morning, Donald Trump called in. He was apparently supposed to be down there to say hi or speak to them or something. He calls in. Ronna Romney McDaniel, Mitt Romney's niece, puts him on the speakerphone. She's the head of the RNC, puts him on the speakerphone. And here's where I found this. This is in today's Washington Post. Under the title of Live Updates, Schumer calls for Trump to be removed from office. Trump pledges an orderly transition. And it's the second story under that by Josh Dawsey and Felicia Sonmez. Trump briefly called into the Republican National Committee's winter meeting Thursday morning, that's just hours ago, and received a loud and overwhelmingly enthusiastic reception when RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel put him on the speakerphone, according to people in the room. "We love you," someone in the room yelled. Right. Trump said he heard that the news media had falsely reported that he would not be speaking. They're meeting at the Ritz-Carlton in Florida on Amelia Island. He told the RNC members he wanted to speak. He was sorry he missed the event. Look forward to seeing them in person. No mention of what happened yesterday by him or by the Republicans. This is like, oh, gee, it's just, and then on Fox News last night, Louise and I popped over 2 or 3 times to check out what was going on Fox News. And in every single case, now I don't know if this was their coverage all night long, because in aggregate, I doubt we watched more than 10 minutes of Fox News, but what I was seeing, part of the shows of a couple of peers of mine, old radio people who now have shows on Fox News, was essentially, oh, it's not so bad, and oh, the liberals made them do it, and oh, maybe it's actually Antifa, and by the way, there is no such thing as Antifa. Antifa is a word that means a person who's opposed to fascism. It's a contraction of anti-fascist. It's not an organization. There's no, you can't mail a letter to Antifa. There is no post box. Oy. But this is where we're at. This is where we're at, sadly, right now. Our senator, Jeff Merkley, has posted pictures of his office and his Senate office being trashed. I mean, this is crazy stuff. This is flat out crazy stuff. So anyhow, let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Mark in Atwood, Kansas. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Is there any other course of action that the Congress can take away power from Trump? I know in Kansas we've got a pretty devout QAnon following, and they're viewing impeachment or the 25th Amendment as his final action as cue to take more retaliatory action on the government. And I guess that's concerning to me that they're viewing yesterday is just the start, not the end. So what are your thoughts? I'll take off air. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. My thoughts generally go to the larger issue of who is promoting these kind of conspiracy theories and why. I'm increasingly thinking that the people who are driving this process, I mean, the whole QAnon thing started out as a joke, right? It started out with this strange little guy, and I say little because he's very short and he's in a wheelchair, and he lives in the Philippines, and he's an American, but he lives in the Philippines, and he kind of tossed this thing out, and it just started growing from there, right? And it started as a joke essentially, and it has become a thing, and I'm thinking that there are foreign governments involving themselves in this, that are just cranking this stuff. We know that there are foreign governments that have been using social media, principally Facebook. Facebook is the main vehicle for all of this. It's been happening in Europe. It was happening in France. It's been happening the whole Brexit thing was largely driven by Facebook stuff. And it turns out that a lot of that was coming from outside the country. Much of it from Russia, but also from other countries as well. And so, I don't much care what they think, because they're going to turn whatever happens into more fodder for their fantasy world in which they live. So, there's nothing that you can do that's going to cause them to wake up or change anything. It's like, don't even bother. But number two, I think we need to do what's best for the country. We have I was going to say a crazy man, but this goes way beyond that. We have a man who is a threat. A nuclear war could sterilize the planet. Nuclear winter would repeat what happened that wiped out the dinosaurs. Some 80-90% of all life on Earth, certainly anything bigger than a dog, dies. And the guy in the White House right now has the potential, has the ability to invoke that, to produce that, to bring that about. And I think we need to take this very seriously, and I think we need to be very concerned about it. And in my mind, that means they need to be impeached. Brian in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Yeah, two quick questions, and then you can answer when I'm off the line. But when will Ossoff and Warnock be seated, at least in theory? And then can Mitch McConnell block that? I've heard he can refuse to seat them, but I hope not. Thank you.
Yeah, he can refuse to seat them. He will not, I guarantee you. And I don't know what the date is that they get seated. That's one of those bits of minutia that I've not come across, and I need to be keeping my eye out for because I just don't know the answer. But the bottom line is, Mitch McConnell is going to have the Senate firmly in control until January 20th. And I'm guessing that they will have been sworn in before January 20th. It would surprise me if they weren't. But that would have to do with the Georgia law with regard to that special election. And it may be different, by the way, for Warnock and Ossoff, because Kelly Loeffler had been an appointee, and her term expired in, I think, a different way than, or maybe it didn't. I'm not sure. We'd have to go back and look at the Georgia law. So, Brian, I'm sorry, I don't have a clear, crisp answer for you on that. But we'll keep our eyes open, and I'll report back to you as soon as I figure it out. As far as I can tell, by the way, my explanation of the 25th Amendment is more or less accurate. John in Fruitland, Idaho. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
How are you? Tom, just a quick comment to ponder. I've thought about it for some time now, but I think that the way things have evolved, that anybody that receives a nomination for their parties as a candidate for president, I think should have to have a complete, comprehensive psychiatric evaluation. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything like that. But it just it to me, I think what we're seeing now is and it shouldn't maybe just apply to the president. I think the way things are right now, maybe it should apply to a few of our lawmakers and our.
Well, that's what elections are supposed to do, John. I mean, here's the problem, and this is the place where I find myself in agreement with some people on the right, although I don't think this should be a left-right issue, frankly. And that is, if you pass a law that says that anybody who wants to run for office has to qualify themselves by passing a psychological exam, the power to enforce that law is given to the executive branch. So right now, if that was the case, Donald Trump would decide which psychiatrist is going to interview Joe Biden to determine whether he can legally run for president. Do you really want that?
No.
Suddenly it becomes problematic. I mean, there is such a thing as too much government power. In fact, we've seen it all around the world, and we're seeing it here. And so I really think that this is our job. This is the job of the voters. And it's the job of the media, too. And the media has been falling down on this, and that's a whole nother can of worms. But this is our job. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's talk media for the sane among us. And yes, our ranks are growing. We'll be back. And welcome back. Diane in Hazel Creek, Illinois, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Diane, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I have a couple of points or questions I'd like to ask you. What can the average citizen do besides voting and contacting their congressman, which I just did? Thank you very much for providing that number earlier, to prevent another Trump coming into office in the future? And also, how can we convince the Democrats to get a spine and do more than what they consider strong letters to make sure these Republicans and their ilk and future people like them aren't able to gain and control power in our government? How do they intend to hold the current administration and all of Trump's enablers to pay for their crimes? After what?
Yeah, let me speak to that, Diane,
I would think
if I could real quickly. And then
anything less than criminal prosecution unacceptable.
Yeah. What you can do, what I can do, what each one of us individually can do is show up within the Democratic Party and to answer both your questions with one answer. And the reason why is ever since the late 1970s, the Republican Party has basically entirely, 100%, been the party of giant corporations and billionaires. The Supreme Court legalized political bribery in 76 and 78 by individual billionaires and corporations respectively in those 2 years. And the Reagan administration said, bring it on. And that's been the Republican Party ever since. So there is no reforming the Republican Party right now. There is only beating individual Republicans in the elections, which brings us to the Democratic Party. At the time of those two Supreme Court decisions, the Buckley case in 76 and the Bellotti case in 78, the Democratic Party was awash in cash from unions. And they thought, oh, we don't need corporate money. We've got plenty of union money. Well, Reagan took care of that. And so then Bill Clinton came in 92 and said, well, we've got to have corporate money and billionaire money or we can't run national elections, created the DLC and all that kind of stuff. And so now you've got a situation where about half of the Democratic Party is funded by essentially the same people as the Republicans. And the other half of the Democratic Party is funded by the grassroots. And that's the progressive half. That's, and the Progressive Caucus represents a little less than half of the Democratic Caucus. So if you want, number one, to have politicians who are actually responsive to the people, and number two, a Democratic Party that will stand up to, that will get a spine, to use your phrase, and stand up to the Republicans, what we have to do is increase that majority within the Democratic Caucus, within the Democratic Party, of Democrats who are committed to their voters who are funding their elections, rather than to Big Pharma who is funding their election, or a big hospital, like Joe Lieberman. He blew up the option, the single payer option, the Medicare option, because he took over $1 million from the insurance industry, from the health insurance industry. So what we need to do is start showing up, participating, become a precinct committee person, be one of the people who helps write the rules, be one of the people who helps choose the candidates, get good people in for city council in Hazel Crest, Illinois, for your county government, get involved with your county government. We have to build this from the ground up, Diane. It's not something that's just going to magically come into being because we make a phone call or a donation. And the Republican Party and the billionaires who fund them have been working on this. The Tea Party was their first major project like this, and it was very successful for them. And they're using the same things now, and that's what we have to do. Diane, did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you so very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for asking. Thanks for watching Free Speech. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes, or we'll be shortly. We're after the hour. Stick with me. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So we have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who are signed up, for supporters of our program. And it's about how Donald Trump, 16 days after Mr. Khashoggi was murdered by the Saudis in Turkey and his body dismembered and vanished, 16 days after that happened, without notifying Congress and with virtually no mention to anybody, Donald Trump authorized the transfer of top secret nuclear technology to the Saudis. This should be a serious issue. Tim Kaine, the senator from Virginia, is raising hell about it because Khashoggi lived in Virginia. But I think everybody in Congress should be raising hell about this. And when you back this up with this new report out from ProPublica that the Saudis were involved in 9/11, it gets real interesting. So you can check that out over at thomhartmann.com. Look for our basically members-only video. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So we have a precedent for senators being expelled from the United States Senate. It happened in 1861, starting in July of 1861. We have a precedent for presidents being impeached, and in fact, even for Donald Trump being impeached. Ted Lieu and friends have now drawn formal articles of impeachment against Donald Trump in the House of Representatives. There are several different articles of impeachment that I've seen floating around, but the Democrats today need to coalesce around one set of articles of impeachment. Nancy Pelosi needs to bring it to the House. If she needs a Judiciary Committee vote, do it virtually. Needs to bring it to the floor of the House and have an up or down vote on it and get that thing out so that Trump is impeached. And then it goes to the Senate. And during that time, he loses the pardon power. This is probably the most important part of this. And the Senate, Mitch McConnell can, if he doesn't think that he's got enough votes to remove Trump, if there's enough Republicans who are willing to go down with the ship, as it were, well, Mitch can procrastinate until January 20th. Which means all that time, Trump would no longer have pardon power. Now, again, this hasn't been adjudicated by the Supreme Court, but I think it's fairly clear. It's certainly clear to me, having read James Madison's notes on the daily debates in Independence Hall in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787. It is so clear. I mean, there was the whole exception to the pardon clause, where it says except during times of impeachment, was written into the pardon clause because they were concerned that, what happens if you've got a corrupt president and he's trying to pardon his collaborators in the crime that Congress is trying to impeach him for. The two things are tied together. At least they were in the minds of the men who wrote this thing. So, anyhow. Chris Mina, am I saying that right, in Durango,
yes.
Colorado?
Yes. Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I caught your interview the other day with Dr. Justin Frank regarding his book, Trump on the Couch. And I found that very fascinating and makes so much sense about why so many people are devoted to this disturbed person. So I'm not hearing on any other programs, and that's why I'm calling your program. To get some exposure to the fact that there is a method to remove a person from society who is a danger to himself or to others. In California, it's called a 5150. And this is a legal method through which a person may be put under 72-hour observation in a safe location. And this would quickly remove him, from making some more problems. Also, it has
hang on just a second, Chrismina. Pretty much every state has those kind of laws. They're for the public safety to protect, society and family members from a person who's just snapped, somebody who might be homicidal or suicidal or whatever. But typically they require direct family member intervention and physician intervention. Donald Trump's physicians work for the Navy. And therefore they work for him. He's the commander-in-chief. They're not going to buck him. And there's no way that Melania is going to sign off on this. So I don't see it happening.
There's no exception to the fact that the global population is at risk as well?
Well, you could argue that this would have to be done under the Washington, D.C. version of California's Section 5150, and neither one of us knows what the details of that are. But I would say that the 25th Amendment is really the governing power here, or impeachment. Those are really the only two solutions that we have. And we've got to look at these.
Okay, so that's our only option at this point, nothing quicker.
That's it. And I agree with your point, Krishmina, and Justin Frank, Dr. Justin Frank MD on Twitter, I agree with his point that Trump is a danger to himself and others. Clark in Chevy Chase, Maryland. Hey, Clark, what's up?
Hi, yes, I have a question, or a pair of questions, rather. My first question is, I'm of the opinion that the Capitol Police either report to directly or indirectly to the Speaker of the House. And assuming that that's true, and I'm not sure about that premise, there's been a lot of concern about the police presence and the police response in defending the Capitol building itself. And is it possible that the opponents of or critics of Speaker Pelosi could turn that into sort of like a Benghazi or a 9/11 type commission and cause her political damage?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to any of those questions. I'm looking at the Capitol Police Wikipedia here. Let me give you the answer on the other side of this break. It's I need to do some research. Thanks a lot for the call, Clint. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Yeah, the Capitol Police answer to Congress, not the President of the United States. Interesting. We'll be right back.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken, because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatis, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The Undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met, who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggests that the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study.
The hidden history of the war on voting tells how the GOP has been stealing elections for decades and will again this year unless we stop them. So we've had a new video over at thomhartmann.com for the folks who support our program. It's about two people you probably never heard of, Isabel Cairo and Jay Sim. They are economists with the Federal Reserve. And they just came out with this extraordinary new paper. It was actually published by the Fed, in which they point out that most of the economic crises and problems that we're experiencing in the United States, going back to the 1980s, the stagnation in wages, the actual drop in wages, the stagnation in household income, as more and more people in households are working, the explosion in the net worth of the top 5% of households, things that are driving, credit bubbles and other, stock bubbles and things like this. A dramatic amount of that was the result of monopoly power, corporate monopoly power, and about half of that could have been eliminated if we simply taxed unearned income. It's amazing. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Okay, a couple of things, two corrections, because I've said two things today that were not accurate or entirely accurate or both, and one piece of data. 3:49 in the morning today, Donald Trump, through an aide, tweeted, "This is only the beginning of the fight to make America great again." In other words, our attempted fascistic takeover of the United States, this is the beginning, not the end. As I started this program telling you, this is not over. This is far from over. Secondly, and tip of the hat to Norm, and thank you. I kept saying that Article 2 says that the president has the power to give pardons except in times of impeachment. The actual phrase is except in cases of impeachment. The actual phrase is, he shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States except, excuse me, I had to sneeze there, except in cases of impeachment. So cases of impeachment, Norm suggests, could mean that the president can't pardon somebody else who's been impeached. In other words, you can't pardon an impeachment. But again, as I said, this has not gone before the Supreme Court. It has not been adjudicated. We don't really know. And then finally, I said that Mark Meadows had resigned The news this morning was Mick Mulvaney, who is now the ambassador, who used to be the head of OMB, had resigned. I confused the two in my brain somehow. Mick Mulvaney and Mark Meadows, maybe it's all the M's, I don't know, but Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, has not resigned, is still in the White House. And in fact, earlier, I don't know if I liked it or retweeted it, there was a video of him and Don Jr., Mark Meadows and Don Jr., while the riots were going on, well, actually during the lead up to the riot yesterday, to the seditious vandalism of the Capitol, watching it on TV, going, yeah, hey, this is cool. Yeah. Okay, Tom in Long Island. Hey, Tom, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Tom, something you said before I disagreed with. A caller said that when would the two Georgia senators be seated? And you thought that Mitch McConnell would do it right away, given the option. But wouldn't that cause a problem if the 25th Amendment keeps coming up and Mike Pence does become the president? He would no longer be president of the Senate. And wouldn't that would Mitch McConnell now have a disadvantage if those two Democrats were seated?
No, because first of all, when they're seated, I believe is going to be governed by Georgia law. That was my point. So I don't know when they're going to be seated. And first, I mean, you've got to have Raffensperger certify the election in Georgia, and I don't think the election has even been certified yet. Or if it has, it's been, it's fairly recent. But I don't know what the Georgia law is or when it's going to happen. But secondly, if Vice President Pence becomes President Pence because Donald Trump has been removed, if it's on a temporary basis using the 25th Amendment, I don't know what happens with replacing him in that number 2 position, because the president has been not essentially. Well, I don't know how that would play out. I don't know if there's time enough for that to play out. For him to say, to do a Jerry Ford thing, like Nixon said, okay, I'm bringing in Jerry Ford, and then Nixon leaves, and Jerry Ford becomes president when he was never even elected to anything except the House of Representatives from Grand Rapids. But I don't think that it's going to be, I don't think that would be an issue, Tom. I just don't see how it becomes an issue. But thanks for the question. It's a good question. Jeff in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Well, I was just calling to say that I feel like impeachment is our best solution right now and just so imperative. And I've been calling the hotline since you gave that number out, and I've left 4 messages so far, 2 with Colorado representatives, 1 with New Mexico, and 1 with Oklahoma, all places I've lived. But I'm going to keep calling, and I think everybody should call every representative and senator and just pour the pressure on them. Just flood it and say because
I'm with you. And the phone number. Okay. And the phone number. And get a pen and get ready to write this down. The phone number to call the Senate switchboard, or it's actually the Capitol switchboard. So you can ask for a senator or a member of the House of Representatives. If you're not sure who represents you, just say, "Hey, I'm calling from Iowa. Who's my senators?" Or, "Hey, my zip code is 97355. Who's my representative?" And they will tell you, and they will then connect you with the office. That phone number is 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. I'm guessing most of the operators are probably working from home right now, but they seem to be answering the phones just fine. So, and they do compile the information of the calls, and they do pass the calls directly to the offices of those members of Congress. So good on you, Jeff. Was there a question in there, or did you just want to report?
No, that was it. You can call anybody, though. You don't just have to call your representative. You can call, you get an opportunity. They say, what state? Say, X state, and you get an opportunity to leave a message. So they're representing all of us. So call all of them is my view. Yes. And I just, that's it. Thank you so much.
I share your opinion, although I'm telling you that when you call, if I were to call, either of my 2 senators, Wyden or Merkley, and the first words out of my mouth were, "Hi, my name is Thom Hartmann, and I live in Oregon," and because they're my Oregon senators, they're going to put whatever I have to say. They're going to the aide or the clerk or the person who's keeping track of the phone calls is going to put that in a different pile than if you called from Santa Fe.
But I called Oklahoma.
Their first job is to represent their constituents. But I agree with you. We should call everybody in sight, but don't don't neglect to call your own 2 senators and your own member of the House of Representatives. That's my point.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much, Tom.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Great talking with you, Jeff. Mark in Sauk City, Wisconsin. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey there, and for as far as the terms for senators, I mean that Article 20 begins, the terms of president and vice president shall end at noon on the 20th day of January, and the terms of senators and representatives at noon on the 3rd day of January. And it goes on.
That's why they were sworn in on Sunday.
But
I mean,
before
the election.
Right, before the election, but as far as I'm concerned, their term ended. I mean, their term should have ended because there was, it was kind of because of the vagaries of Georgia law having to have the runoff.
Oh, that's an interesting
point. Essentially, Georgia should have been unrepresented at that point in time because they did not have a elected senator. I mean, that's my read
how
of
did
the
Kelly
US
Loeffler?
Constitution.
How did Kelly Loeffler stand up and speak on behalf of Georgia when she wasn't sworn into office on January 3rd? What the hell was she doing there?
That's how it should have been. I mean that, and for Senator Tuberville from Alabama, this is probably a question on the citizenship test. The answer to the 3 branches of government are legislative, executive, and judicial. That he wouldn't even pass a question. Pass a question that's probably on the citizenship test that people come immigrating to this country would have to answer. I mean, it's just
Tommy Tuberville is he's in a competition with Ron Johnson to be the stupidest member of the Senate. There's no other possible explanation. Spot on, Mark. Thank you for the call, Larry in Blackfoot, Idaho. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind?
Well, I'm wondering, maybe this is way out in left field, but do you think Trump and those senators that were going to argue or vote against, challenge the Electoral College votes, do you think they could be associated with the Proud Boys?
Well, as Michael Keaton said in a movie years and years ago, is a frog's ass watertight? Yes, of course.
Well,
yes, I think so.
And
not just that one particular group. There are now competing groups on the right. There are competing groups on the right who are trying to infiltrate law enforcement. There are competing groups on the right who want to be the guys who are the dirt kickers out on the streets. There are competing groups on the right. So sometimes it's hard to tell the teams without the uniforms or without the scorecards. But and that's frankly a problem, Larry. Is that just like with the Tea Party? The Tea Party was a completely astroturf thing, put together by the Koch network. And it was treated by the national media as if it was a huge national movement, when in fact it was a relatively small tail that was wagging this giant dog of the Republican Party through the media. And the same is true, in my opinion, of these right-wing groups. Larry, thanks for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back in just a moment with more of your calls. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. We're right here. It's Thom Hartmann. We'll be right back. And welcome back, Robin in Kingston, Washington. Hey, Robin, what's on your mind today?
Well, Tom, generally I want to just raise a very cautionary flag here and there, not to overreact to things. But before I mention that, I just want to let you know I very much support this impeachment thing, because we need to memorialize Republican Trumpsters into the future. So I'm all in with this impeachment. The red flags I'm talking about, so that we don't overreact, is I'm deeply troubled by 2 things that have happened here. One is that Zuckerberg is now censoring a U.S. president. Now, I don't like Trump, but I censor him myself personally, okay? But I argue that this could be a slippery slope, because Zuckerberg and other of those social media outlets can start to feel good about censoring our voices next. That's really troubling to me. And number two, I'm a very proud 9/11 Truthful World Peace activist and the surrogate whistleblower for air traffic controllers on 9/11, and there's such a haunting parallel for the events on 9/11 and then yesterday, and that parallel is the amount of massive information that was available that this event was going to happen, very similar to 9/11, and there was no preparation for either one of them. It's terribly, terribly troubling to me. And as you know, the Patriot Act, which was written before 9/11, was basically almost ushered into immediate action because of this knee-jerk reaction. So I'm just really asking the left to really be thoughtful before you rush into being happy because we're giving Trump a bloody nose. And finally, Tom, kudos to the left for not showing up. Man, what a growth. What a maturity growth. It's just wonderful. I'm so proud that the left just said, well, let's just not repeat, Portland and Seattle and all that kind of stuff. That's really all.
If they
I
had shown up, the police would have gone after them. Especially if there were black people among the left, right? That you would have. I mean, it's just. I mean, I remember, a few months ago when we were all protesting the murder of George Floyd, among others. And there was a Black Lives Matter protest in Washington, D.C., and what did they do? The Capitol Police came out, and you can see the pictures of it. They're all over the internet. They were lined up all the way around the Capitol building on all the steps, multiple cops deep with their riot shields and I mean, just ready for war. And then yesterday you had what? A bunch of cops who were just wearing their regular street uniforms who were going to deal with a mob of thousands that had been whipped into a frenzy by Rudy Giuliani telling them that we have to go to battle, or words to that effect. I forget his exact phrase. And Donald Trump Jr. screaming obscenities to the extent that Fox News had to take him off the air. I mean, it's amazing, Robin.
Anyways, I agree, Tom. So kudos to the left, and someday they'll understand how badly they were set up by Antifa, which has a darker history than what is out in the streets right now. So anyways, thank you, Tom.
Who was set up by Antifa? Robin, I'm not going there. I'm assuming you are speaking facetiously. We'll be right back. It is coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast, 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com.
So for our Thom Hartmann Insider videotape that is over, or videotape, YouTube, whatever you want to call it, private video that's available over at thomhartmann.com, I'm talking this week about Donald Trump just completely giving in to Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, the dictator of Turkey now. And this theory that Jared Kushner okayed the killing, at least the capture, perhaps the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and to Mohammed bin Salman, and that Erdogan has the tape of it, and that when he called up Donald Trump a couple weeks ago and said, I want you to pull out of Syria and give me those Kurds so I can kill them and take that land, that he did it because Erdogan threatened him. And then Erdogan comes to the United States, a week or two later and gets a whole state dinner thing. Check it all out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. I think you'll find it fascinating.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Once again, the number to call Congress if you would like to see Donald Trump impeached is 202-224-3121. And Trudy in Gurnee, Illinois. Hey, Trudy, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. NPR posted this morning that Derek Evans, a newly elected member of the West Virginia House of Delegates, was seen in a video as part of the group that stormed the Capitol. The video has since been taken down, but other, media users copied it and posted it. And there's even audio of people yelling, we're in, Derek Evans is in the Capitol. So what can happen to him? Doesn't he need to be held accountable for this?
He can be expelled. He was elected to the West Virginia legislature, but he showed up in the U.S. Capitol for the riot. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
He was
it's going to be up to it's going to be up to the Republicans in West Virginia, but this has got to be, if nothing else, a severe embarrassment for them. It's remarkable. Trudy, thank you for the heads up on that. Grace in Seattle. Hey, Grace, what's on your mind?
Hey, what are your thoughts on the Republican Party splitting in two between the QAnon crazies and the more classic, normal Republicans who maybe are just fearful of leftism and socialism?
Yeah, I think it's already happened, and we're seeing it played out in real time. The Republican Party has constantly been ever since 1980, when the Republican Party basically became the party that was just all about money. It's all about big corporations and billionaires. They had to expand. They had to build a coalition of people who would vote for them, who didn't care about money or billionaires, because there aren't enough billionaires or people who want corporations to make more profits to propel a national party to an election. So they reached out to the white racists. This was Nixon's Southern strategy back in '68. They reached out to the white racists that Lyndon Johnson had discarded. They reached out to in the 1980s. They reached out to the gun nuts, which was just then an emerging group. Basically, in 1974, the NRA was just a sportsman's club, literally. They, none of this stuff. But then the weapons manufacturers got behind it, and they created this whole thing. Then they reached out to the anti-abortion people, even though Reagan had signed pro-abortion legislation in California, been very proud of it, and George Herbert Walker Bush, as vice president, had been on Planned Parenthood. I believe he was on their board. If he wasn't on their board, he was a huge supporter, as was his wife Barbara, publicly. But they got into bed with the anti-abortion freaks and brought them into the party. They got into bed with the anti-gay freaks, the anti-LGBTQ freaks, and brought them into the party. They keep having to add to their coalition of the crazy, basically, in order to win elections. And they're now down to the point where, in some parts of the country, they can't win elections without the conspiracy nut freaks. And so in those parts of the country where Republicans can still win elections just based on hate and fear of black people and brown people, and hate and fear of gay and non-cis, non-binary people, to the extent that they can do that, what you're going to see is basically the business Republican Party and the crazy Republican Party. And they're going to try and have it both ways. They've been successfully having it both ways for 4 solid years now, and really for the better part of 12 years since Barack Obama was elected. That was really when all this craziness began, when a whole bunch of white Republicans said, oh my God, there's a black man in our White House. You can't, that's not supposed to be. And so I don't think this is going to go away, Grace, because the party needs these people, or they need to effectively suppress the votes of everybody else, which, is why they're all screaming about voter fraud. They're trying to get back to just being the party of voter suppression rather than the party of having to embrace the crazies. But none of this bodes well for the future of the Republican Party, in my humble opinion. Grace, thanks for the call. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's up? Last minute.
Yeah, hey, just one thing first, since Elaine Chao's name came up. I don't think that there should be 2 immediate family members running 2 branches of government at the same time. I don't have a problem.
I consider it a conflict, too.
Greg, yeah, I don't have a problem with Mike Pence's brother, Greg, being congressman, but if he became Speaker of the House while Mike was vice president, I'd have a problem with that.
Right.
The other thing is that I think what should happen is these Congress people should lose their seats, and they should be brought up on charges. But the congressmen who, before they leave, help to impeach and get rid of Trump should get leniency and not necessarily get charged with the crime.
Yeah, I think at the very least they need to experience censure, but at the most they should be expelled. And somewhere in that spectrum, something has to happen. Bill, I'm with you. Thank you very much for the call. Thank you for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In fact, tomorrow will be Anything Goes Friday. I believe Congressman Ro Khanna is going to drop by for an hour or two and take your calls. So it should be a real interesting day. Looking forward to it. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. So call 202-224-3121 and let your member of Congress know what you're thinking. Tag you're it. Excuse me. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code TOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code TOM.